We're going to talk about the nervous system and group coherence as a way to understand how the class kind of works and how our role plays into that. So, the teacher's nervous system organizes the room. It influences the student's sense of safety, and that's not just physical safety, but also emotional and social safety. And it affects learning outcomes. So you being regulated and grounded actually supports the rest of the room in also being regulated and grounded, which is the window of tolerance in which we learn in, which we'll talk about in a moment. And I want to show you this kind of very rough model of your classroom or a classroom ecosystem. What we have is a set of feedback loops. All of these interactions are happening. Students are interacting with each other. They're looking at each other. They're looking at you. You're looking at them. You're talking. You're discussing. And there's a lot of information exchange. And when this is kind of all flowing and moving, that's when we get more of the facilitated flow I mentioned. And the teacher doesn't have to do as much heavy lifting to carry the energy. It's much more complex than this, but this is a simplification so we can just sort of think with the model. And just imagine everyone is exchanging information and energy and emotional energy and all of this. This would be a model where we don't have quite as much interaction going on in the class. And I'm not trying to say that one is necessarily the right one or better than the other, but again, it helps us think about what's going on in the room. In this model, the students are really just interacting with the teacher. They're looking to the teacher. They're not really interacting with each other or like watching what the others are doing. And this can happen in a scenario where maybe like there's one person per apparatus, people don't really know each other. There's not a consistent cohort that goes to the class together. And it is true that the teacher will likely have to do a bit more management and regulation of the room from their part, because the students aren't reinforcing that. So there are definitely advantages to this model where there's more dynamics going on between everybody instead of everybody just feeding to the teacher. And you can imagine how this might be just more pressure for the teacher. Okay, so let's talk about the nervous system briefly to review, or if it's new, we want to be aware of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system states. So in sympathetic, we are very activated, fight or flight. And in parasympathetic, it's about rest and restoration and kind of coming back down. And we want a balance of both in aerial class. Okay, so we have something called the window of tolerance, which you may be familiar with. The window of tolerance is this zone kind of where your prefrontal cortex, your brain is online, you can feel your body, you're able to regulate yourself. You're kind of in this mode where you can go this way or that way and you have a lot of fluidity. In hyperarousal, we are becoming emotionally distressed, overwhelmed, not feeling our bodies, unable to think well. And in this particular graphic, it suggests mindfulness, grounding, and breath work. I just want to point out that those tools are often not helpful because they can be even more triggering because they feel controlling, or they feel like I'm not safe to do something calm because I still feel threatened. So there are other approaches. We won't go deeply into it in this masterclass, but sometimes things like shaking out or running a lap or like pressing against a wall, those can be more regulating than like mindfulness tools. So I think sometimes we get this idea that like mindfulness and breath work is always the answer, and often it for some people is more harmful. And then we have hypoarousal. So this is particularly if students are feeling sleepy, or if they're not engaged with the content, if they're getting bored, if for whatever reason in their life they're just feeling kind of disassociated, then we have hypoarousal, and that's also not a great space for learning because the mind it's just not engaged the way we need it to be. So we want everyone, including the teacher, to be inside their window of tolerance. You're gonna move up because we're gonna do a scary drop, but then we're gonna come back down when we're doing cocoon in the silk knot, and we'll move around inside, but We also need to learn how to look for signs that we're going a little bit beyond or a little bit below that zone. And when we have everyone in the group in that window of tolerance, it allows us to have group coherence. So this is where everyone's kind of on the same wavelength, we're carrying the energy together, and there's a lot of exchange of information and emotion, and it's positive and it builds upon itself. That's when teaching gets easier. Okay, since you have a disproportionate effect on the room through your role as the teacher, some questions to ask are you in your window of tolerance? Does the class need down regulation? Do they need to be calmed? Are they getting a little bit like stressed out or scared or like overexcited? Or do they need up regulation because they're feeling tired? Like Hannah mentioned, students might walk in tired and drained, but they walked out inspired and feeling good and feeling like themselves. And I remember once I had one of those days where multiple people came in like had a terrible day and they were feeling really bummed. And so I remember I think I also wasn't having a great day. So I had us pick up the kids' ribbon wands and we started our warm up with ribbon wand dancing and it immediately changed the course of everything. Not saying that will work for everyone every time, but it got people out of that hypo arousal feeling bummed and dejected and into the window of tolerance. And yeah, are you signaling safety and confidence? Are you expressing yourself in a way that inspires confidence in your students and makes them feel like, yeah, I feel safe. I'm not scared of like being hurt or trying something and failing in front of other people. And then asking yourself what you need to regulate before, during, and after class to feel like you're in your window of tolerance. Okay, so we talked a bit about like the nervous system and how it's playing out in class. And we learned that having ourselves in the window of tolerance is good for learning. And what else promotes learning? Okay, fundamentally feeling safe, physically, emotionally, socially, balanced nervous system state. A sense of belonging is really, really important, and that feeds into feeling socially safe, especially in a vulnerable setting where we're trying new things. Having a reasonable balance of challenge and success so that we're not getting bored and like, I already learned this and I already know it. And we're not just like getting hit with challenge after challenge that we can't get. Those are just killers of window of tolerance. Some fear is actually good. It can heighten alertness and it can help with memory encoding. Okay, so all these things allow the prefrontal cortex to remain online. So this allows us to regulate ourselves. It allows us to learn and remember and feel our bodies. And it allows us to feel like, okay, I can try something that might be scary. All right, so the prefrontal cortex up front here, it's really like our thinking brain. Um, and then we have the amygdala. And the amygdala is commonly referred to as like the fear center. And that's true, but also it is supportive of all kinds of more diverse emotions than just fear. So they're learning more that the amygdala isn't just about fear, it's about emotion and memory. And just a clarification, this is a cross section. It's easy to get the idea that we have one. We actually have two. It's like symmetric. And so your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala are like, they're like texting each other all the time. The amygdala is like, hey, I think this thing is like really scary. And the prefrontal cortex might say, no, that drop is safe. Your teacher showed you. It's good. See, you can see the wraps. It's all good. And that can inhibit the amygdala. So the amygdala is like, okay, I won't signal fear so strongly. I'll just be like a little scared. But if the amygdala does not get inhibited, it will keep signaling stronger, like this is dangerous. Because your amygdala wants to keep you safe. And then you can freeze or shut down. And you, for example, aren't going to do the silk drop and you maybe need to walk it down. And this is a photorealistic, accurate depiction of that brain interaction. And we need to acknowledge that Ariel is very nervous system intensive for so many reasons. We've got height, unusual new positions, pain and pressure. Spinning is really intensive on the vestibular system. Complex wraps lots of steps to remember. It's physically demanding. There are risks and definitely social concerns because it's vulnerable to try something in front of others. It's vulnerable to receive feedback in front of others. And It's very normal for students to feel like embarrassed to try something, and especially when they don't have a lot of familiarity with other people in the group. All of these things can be adapted to by the nervous system, so they won't be as intense as students get more exposed to them. And that's part of our work as the teacher. But as I mentioned earlier, the material of aerial is very challenging. So it's not unlikely for students to get elevated, to get hyper arousal. And so they start going into that red zone out of their window of tolerance. So maybe you've experienced it before, maybe you've seen it. I have certainly been here many a time. I feel like silks is one of those things because the fabric doesn't always behave that can trigger this. And also for me, it's whenever I'm trying to like open something. What happens is we try to do the thing, it slips away or it doesn't work. That makes us start to get activated. When we get overactivated, our fine motor skills and our reasoning decline. So then we start doing increasingly aggressive and bad movements, basically, that make us more frustrated because the thing's not working. I can't grab the fabric. It becomes frantic. And we call this a positive feedback loop. Positive not meaning good. Positive meaning it's escalating, and the only thing that stops it is